And welcome UCF fans back to our 5 question series with each opponent. This will be the first game of Big 12 play, a big tone setter for the Knights this coming season when they go to TCU in September. And we're joined today by Stephen Johnson of the Fort Worth Star Telegram. We love media outlets that are hyphenated. Stephen, how are you?
I'm doing all right, man. Appreciate the invite.
Thanks for coming on. We would love to kind of know a little bit more about the Horned Frogs. This is your third season covering the team. Give us kind of a sense of TCU and what they've done as far as adapting to the Big 12 over the years.
Well, I mean, they fit in pretty well. Obviously, they had that near historic run in, I think, 2014 and 15, where they probably should have made the playoff. 22, they obviously made the playoff, win a game against a Michigan team that basically brought everybody back and won a title this season. So I think TCU has proven. Now, before I got older, I should say, I always thought TCU was a bigger school like Texas A&M and Texas, and then I get down here and I think undergrad is either 10,000, 12,000. So they've been punching above their weight class now for the last, honestly, probably this entire century. And Sonny Dykes has done a great job. I mean, last season notwithstanding, he did a great job his first season of taking the program to even newer heights. So now there's a lot of pressure on him this season to kind of show, was 2022 just a combination of Gary Patterson's players in a better environment, or was there something specifically to the way he built that team that he can replicate this season going forward?
Yeah, it kind of leads me into the next part of the question. I mean, they've alternated winning and losing seasons now for 6 years. They were in the college football playoff national title game just 2 seasons ago, 5-7 a year ago. Where's kind of the upside, or, where's kind of the ceiling for this team as far as, I imagine they got to be somewhere in the middle of there, right?
Honestly, I feel like everybody in the Big 12 is kind of in the same place with the exception of maybe Utah, Kansas State, and maybe Arizona. Obviously, Oklahoma State made the title game last year. But when you just look around the league, I think a lot of teams are just kind of seeing themselves. A lot of these games on the schedule feel like toss-ups and feel like it come down to a series here or there. So if you're TCU, there's such a wide variance to what I can see them doing. I think they should win their first 2 games of the year, but after that, man, I could see TCU winning 4 or 5 games, but I could also see TCU sneaking up to 8 or 9 because they have, I think, recruiting wise, I still think they may have the most talented or one of the most talented rosters in the league. Um, the close score luck they had in 2022 kind of went the opposite last year. So if you believe in the football guys and things evening now, one would think they'll perform a little bit better in those close games this year, which was the difference between them finishing 5-7, and I think of the Colorado and the West Virginia game. That's the difference between 5-7 and 7-5.
Yeah, I think UCF fans probably kind of feel the same. Certainly the Baylor game stands out in their mind as far as a game that they could have easily put it in as a win on the schedule, and every base of the bottom fell out during the course of that game.
Mm-hmm.
Looking ahead at the roster, you mentioned that there's talent on this squad. Josh Hoover is going to be taking over seemingly as the quarterback. I know Ken Seals was brought in from Vanderbilt as well. What do you feel like are the next steps in progress for Hoover as he really kind of gets his feet wet more, gets more comfortable in this offense?
Just about ball security. I think when he came in, he kind of I can't necessarily say he unlocked the offense, but his deep throw accuracy really, I think, opened the door for some of the receivers like a Savion Williams. If you see, most of his best games last year came when Josh came into the game for Chandler Morris. He's a bit of a gunslinger, has a good arm, good accuracy, and he's not afraid to fit the ball into tight windows. That also gets him into trouble. And I want to say he threw an interception in every single game he played last year, including a crucial one against Texas, which wound up probably being the difference between TCU pulling off that upset. So he was hurt during the spring, had a back injury. So we didn't get to see what if any steps he made over the offseason. But they're high on his talent. Ball security is going to be the main thing. Just knowing when to try to fit the ball into the tight window and maybe when taking the check down. But I think the ideal quarterback for Kendall Brown's offense is a big arm mobile quarterback. I think secondary is a guy like Josh that has just enough mobility, but the accuracy and arm strength to kind of stretch those defenses vertically.
Kendall Briles will certainly be familiar with the quarterback on the field with KJ Jefferson. This is a team that's added nearly 24 players in the transfer portal. Uh, 4 offensive linemen by the looks of it, at least 4 offensive linemen potentially could start for this team. Of those guys, let's I don't have to rattle through all of them, but let's say maybe 3 or 4 guys you think can really make a major impact for the Horned Frogs.
Oh, excuse me. So on offense, I think it starts with Boise State receiver Eric McAllister. He was one of the most productive receivers in the Mountain West Conference. I think he had 800 or 900 yards through 8 games, and I think he sat out the final 4 games and entered the portal. So he's a guy that I expect to immediately start on the outside with Savion Williams, 6'4", another physical jump ball specialist. On the O-line, they brought in a lot of guys, but probably Bless Harris from Florida State or Cade Bennett from San Diego State. I want to say Bennett was a 2-time all-conference player. Harris was kind of a swing tackle for the Seminoles last year. On defense, I think the best transfer they landed out of everybody was Caleb Elarms Orr from California. Anytime you can add an all-conference linebacker, especially that played against all those elite quarterbacks last year, it's huge for them. And they added so much in the secondary. I know you only asked for 4, so but 2 names in the secondary: Cameron Smith from Memphis and Lamarian James from Old Dominion. James could end up starting at cornerback for TCU. He had maybe 5 interceptions during the spring, and I thought Cam Smith, who's going to be playing kind of that nickel third safety role, he's kind of everything TCU wants. He's not the biggest player, but he showed great ball skills and great physicality during the spring.
One of the guys you mentioned, Bless Harris, was a player UCF recruited the first time he went into the portal before he ended up at Florida State. So it'll be interesting to see how he gets on playing tackle for Frogs this season. As you mentioned, Eric McAllister comes over from Boise State, as does Andy Avalos, the new defensive coordinator for TCU. They went head-to-head with Gus Malzahn twice. UCF got the better of Boise in both of those games. What are his main points of emphasis in trying to improve a defense that obviously had its share of struggles in both the pass defense department and the takeaway department last year?
Well, schematically, they're changing things. They were obviously a very standard 3-3-5 the last 2 seasons, and different teams run in different ways. TCU, I think, under Joe Gillespie, ran it the most standard way possible. 3-down linemen. We're mostly going to drop 8 in coverage. If we send a blitz, you pretty much know where it's going to come from, one of the off-ball linebackers. So what Andy has kind of come in, they've gone to more of a 4-2-5 look, which is what they were under Gary Patterson. And there's a lot more movement. There's a lot more different formations you see, a lot different blitzes. You might see a corner blitzing, or you might see a linebacker blitzing these plays, or maybe they just drop everybody out in the coverage. So it was refreshing to see during the spring. Obviously, TCU had some injuries, but it was refreshing to see how much more aggressive, how much more movement was on defense. And finally, it seemed like TCU wasn't just reacting to big plays defensively. They were able to create them this spring.
And then I want to ask you about the home atmosphere at Amon G. Carter Stadium. First trip for UCF to TCU. But I also noticed on the schedule the last couple of years, they've lost 3 or more, or at least 3 home games in 4 of the last 5 years. So what is UCF kind of getting itself into? What should fans know as far as traveling into Fort Worth? What's kind of the scene, the setup there at the stadium?
Well, I believe that's a Big 12 opener for TCU, so it should be a pretty good crowd. When they're winning, when things are going good, TCU does a really good job of. It's not the biggest stadium. It's not going to be Oregon or anything like that. But when they're winning, I think it's been a pretty good crowd. UCF is probably, I would say, a night game at UCF is probably louder than what TCU has shown me the last couple of years. But the stadium is not too far from downtown Fort Worth. It's in a bigger city, so there's a lot to do around the environment. So I don't think the environment will be completely intimidating, but I do think UCF fans that make the trip will find a lot of things to have fun around Fort Worth and around TCU.
It's the Big 12 opener for UCF as well, and I think it's such an important game, not only from just getting off to a good start, but they have both teams have big games right after this. TCU's got SMU right behind it, their big rival, and then UCF will have a bye week before Coach Prime and Colorado come to town. So what's kind of your forecast? I know we're a ways out from the game, but what kind of, if you had to give a prediction or a prognostication of some sort about the game, what would you say about this particular matchup?
it's too early for me to make any predictions just because the offense, like Hoover was out there in the spring, and so were 5 of the top 6 or 7 scholarship receivers. So I would like to see the defense go up against the first team offense a little bit more. But I think when these two teams match up, this will be the first true test for Andy's defense. Have they really made strides from last year, or are they still lacking? Obviously, KJ Jefferson and his mobility will be a challenge, and I'm really interested to see how TCU does. We're trying to tackle all those athletes in space, man. The names are RJ Harvey. I'm sorry, had a brain fart right there. But there's so much talent, so much speed, so much explosiveness with UCF. And the thing that TCU struggled with the most, just turn on that Colorado game and some of the other ones, just tackling in space, man. And I know UCF and Gus Malzahn is going to do a good job of creating those one-on-one matchups. So now TCU's physicality, and I think the scheme of the defense will obviously be tested for really the first time, because I imagine they might have some first game jitters against Stanford, but I think they'll roll there. They got Long Island. They'll blow them out. So this will be the first true test for TCU on both sides of the ball. And of course, if you're Josh Hoover, you've shown the fact that you can move the ball up and down the field. Can you avoid those turnovers, and can they establish the ground game with Cam Cook, who I'm really high on?
Yeah, I think this is also I think UCF has a very similar kind of backdrop to it, right? They got New Hampshire and Sam Houston. It's their first 2 games. This will be a significant jump up in terms of weight class for opponent. The first time away from home, and they struggled quite a bit on the road last year. That said, I think the experience factor on offense, to me, kind of leans a little bit in UCF's favor with KJ Jefferson, with some of those running backs. I think it'll be a really fun matchup to kick off. It'll be on national television too. It's a Fox late kickoff, so the whole nation will get to see both of these 2 teams in action. For fans to find your work and to find you on social media, where can they do so?
You can find all my work at star-telegram.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at Stephen M. Johnson _.
Perfect. And UCF fans watching, you can find me at Chris Boyle DBNJ, and all of our stories and content will be on news-journalonline.com. Should be a good one come September the 14th. Stephen, thank you for your time today, and we'll talk soon.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you.